In this episode of History to Go, we visit the Pahrump Valley Museum, and it contains the history of Pahrump from the earliest days to modern times. But what amazed me as I looked through the collection was how many surprises there were. So join me for this unpredictable story of the history of Pahrump.
Hi, I'm Ted Fay, and I like finding history. It can be in a museum, a hotel, a park, inside or outside, in a church, a house, a store, and of course old buildings and even ghost towns. Wherever there were people, they made history. So I've set out to find those cool places and things that have a great past. Just think of me as your history delivery guy, who brings you new and fresh servings of history to go.
Hey! How you doing? All right, good to see you, Marilyn.
When I arrived, I met up with Marilyn Davis, the enthusiastic and dedicated director of the Pahrump Valley Museum.
Absolutely, we're really glad to be here.
I'd heard about an old mine that the museum was managing and wanted to start out on location there. Our tour guide was Tim France, whom I'd worked with before.
Good to see you again.
It's been a while.
Tim and I headed out to the Johnny Mine, which was once one of Nevada's largest gold producers. This site is closed to the public for now, though there is an exhibit on it at the museum. I asked Tim how the gold was discovered here and how the mine got its name.
The district was actually founded in 1890 by the Montgomery brothers, and they were actually looking for the lost Breyfogle mine, which was a tale of a prospector who found this wonderfully rich ledge of gold, and being attacked by Native Americans, he lost where it was. The Montgomery brothers were out looking for this. One of the brothers, George, actually was walking around camp. They were frustrated. They're about to go home because they're out of money. So George, on one last ditch effort, decided to go ahead and walk around where their camp was. While taking a rest, he sat on this quartz ridge, and lo and behold, there was gold. That was his claim, that he actually found the Breyfogle mine. So they went ahead and filed on it, and they called the mine at that time the Chispa. Well, now we had a big excitement. We have a ledge of gold that was located here in the mountains, so everybody started looking for gold. And two groups of prospectors were the Yance family, which was one of the originating founders of the valley, and then also a gentleman by the name of Indian Johnny, who happens to be the son of Chief Tacopa. Now, where we're standing right now, Indian Johnny found another quartz vein shot full of gold. And in 1891, Indian Johnny found the Johnny mine and sold it to the Montgomery brothers.
When does all of this development that we see around us, when are these built?
Now, the particular head frame and the platform for the actual mill, that came about in 1906. I'm actually very proud that we actually still have a remaining building standing.
Well, let's go out and take a look and see what we can see and just check out the rest of the site.
This is one of the few remaining buildings that actually stands.
So when do you think this was built?
These were actually built back in about 1910, when there was actually a small little town up here. One thing I love about this is how the window frame is still here, still has the original hinges for it, and it's just a nice little building.
And speaking of buildings, back at the museum, there are structures that have been preserved that help tell the story of Pahrump. One of them looks like it's straight out of a Western, the General Store.
This is where people would meet, hang out. Later on, when we had basic phone service, this was actually the location where you would actually come to make a phone call. The post office was here. You can send money orders, you can get your supplies. So it was just the hub, the central hub of a small town.
Tell me a little bit about the Pahrump Ranch itself, because the museum is literally located where the Pahrump Ranch was, right?
Yes, I mean, the Pahrump Ranch, which is one of the original ranches within the valley, was actually first owned by a gentleman by the name of Bennett. And he had a simple little ranch farming operation, nothing really fancy, but Charles Bennett was actually one of the earlier freighters for the borax down in Death Valley.
It's true. Charles Bennett was contracted by the Borax Company to haul the mineral borax 165 miles from Death Valley to the railhead at Mojave, California. It all became part of the lore and legend of what would be known as the 20 Mule Team and the brand 20 Mule Team Borax, a laundry booster which can still be found in stores today. And it all connects to this place called Pahrump.
What does Pahrump even mean?
Well, the actual name Pahrump is actually a bastardization of the actual Paiute word, Pahrumpi. And it literally means water rock.
Now, one of the primary celebrities, if you want to call him that, in terms of the Native American peoples here, was Chief Tecopa, right?
Chief Tecopa was kind of a character in his own. He called himself the chief of all Paiute. He was actually a very powerful man, very well-known man. He had a little house over at the Manse Ranch, and the Yance family just let him stay there in the little adobe, and you can actually still, to this day, find the remnants of the old foundation where he actually used to live.
Tim then took me out into the yard where there was some machinery at the far end. He told me there was a story to every one of these pieces of equipment that related to Pahrump's early days. But I never would have guessed what once was the major crop in this desert valley.
Now, this might seem like an unassuming little ransackled wagon that's starting to fall apart, but what's really interesting, it's an alfalfa baler that was converted to actually bale cotton.
Cotton.
Correct.
So you're growing cotton here in the Pahrump Valley?
Yes, Pahrump Valley has a unique microclimate that allows it to actually grow cotton. The closest cotton gin to Pahrump was in Kern County. So they had to get the cotton from here 300 miles into California to get to the cotton gin. Well, if they try to do it in just regular wagons, but the problem is you can't fit much cotton in there. Somebody thought of the great idea, well, if I take an alfalfa baler, do a little bit of modification, I can actually go ahead and bale it into like an alfalfa bale, and we'll be able to get more loads per wagon. Eventually, the cotton gin, where the Pahrump Nugget sits today, that's actually where the Pahrump Ginning Company, or the Nevada Ginning Company, was actually based. And they had a full gin, water tanks, everything, and it employed a lot of people in this valley.
Cotton was king in the Pahrump Valley from about 1936 to the 1970s. It was John Hughes and his son Leon who started it all. The technology of picking that cotton changed through the years. And here there are some striking examples of that technology.
It was kind of like a big vacuum cleaner with little spinning metal fingers that picked the cotton off. And then it was sucked into this large basket on the back. And then the material that was collected in the back basket was then blown into these other baskets that we have located in the property.
This little house belonged to the Bowman family and was originally on the nearby Manse Ranch. If you're wondering about those big square logs it's built of, yep, those are railroad ties.
When the house was originally built, they went out to, after the track was pulled, took up the railroad ties and built themselves a nice little cottage. Wow, so let's go ahead and go inside and take a look.
All right.
Well, before Elmer Bowman moved into this valley, he was actually a freighter in Moapa Valley here in Nevada, and heard about cheap land and plenty of water, so he moved his family out here. Eventually, when they did settle in this valley, they settled at the Manse Ranch and started doing alfalfa barley like everybody else. He was also champion of the schools. He actually started the school board out here. He actually brought our schoolhouse here. This is actually the first schoolhouse in Pahrump. This was actually brought from Ash Meadows, the clay camps, by Elmer Bowman back in the 40s. This schoolhouse was actually on the Pahrump Ranch.
Okay.
Very close to the proximity of where the store was.
Right. But you didn't bring me here really to just talk about the history as I understand it.
No, even though the history is very interesting, we actually have specters, per se. What we did is we went ahead and set up a Zoom audio recorder. And then we set it to record, and we got 17 hours of audio. But out of that, we got several interesting little blips, or EVPs, as some people call them, that were just intriguing. And one of them, we actually got the sound of a chair moving.
From the haunted schoolhouse, we went inside the museum to experience a high-tech exhibit.
This is the exhibit for the Yucca Mountain Nuclear Waste Facility. And we are, even though it's controversial, we are proud of it because it's the only exhibit of its type in Nevada or in the United States.
Wow.
If you take all the controversy away, you end up with this beautiful engineering feat and how they built this facility underground over a course of many decades. This right here is actually a representation of the actual TBM, or tunnel boring machine. And what we're standing in front of is actually 1/3 the scale of the actual TBM that built the tunnels into Yucca Mountain.
So it would be 3 times this size.
Exactly.
That's big. That's a big drill.
It is. I mean, the engineering is just astonishing.
And this exhibit really tells the story, so people can come here and they can really get a sense of what it took. There's scale models, there's all sorts of ways that people can interact to get the story, right?
Exactly, and anybody worrying about it, it's not a political exhibit. This exhibit, it talks about the engineering and the reasoning behind having the Yucca Mountain Nuclear Waste Facility.
Finally, I asked him about the little shack I had seen out in the yard.
What's really neat about this building is this is actually the oldest building in Pahrump at this time. And this building actually was built on the original Manse Ranch by the Yance family back in the 1890s. We even have pictures showing it on the original Manse Ranch.
Well, it's so great that this is being preserved here. I mean, it's so easy in the desert to knock a building down and just say, well, it's not that important. But the Pahrump Valley Museum has really made a point of actually preserving the history so we can still touch it a little bit, right?
Exactly, and eventually, if time and funds help, we would love to get this restored and actually have it to where people can come in and actually see a very early part of Pahrump history.
That would be great. It's something that the Pahrump Valley Museum and the whole community of Pahrump really can get behind. This is not just a little group that's just trying to do something insignificant. It's the history of this region, right?
Exactly, and if it wasn't for us, a lot of these buildings like the Bowman House, the schoolhouse, the Pahrump store would actually be gone. Somebody would have torn them down to build a modern day house.
This is why community support is necessary. It's why it's important for people to come out and attend the programs. It's why it's important for people to come out and just take a walk through and bring the kids, right?
Oh, exactly. The kids enjoy this place.
Right. And we just think that sometimes the museums just having old dusty stuff and rusty things out in the yard. There are real stories here that really tell the story and the history of this part of Nevada, right?
Exactly.
So what's the invitation, Tim?
Come on down to the Pahrump Museum and learn a little bit about your history.
Pahrump Valley Museum, right here on the site of the old Pahrump Ranch in Pahrump, Nevada.